Ask someone who makes $35,000 a year if they feel broke, and the answer comes fast, almost embarrassed, like the question was rhetorical. Ask someone who makes $600,000, and more often than you'd expect, the answer is also yes, just delivered more quietly, in a nicer kitchen. Same word, same tightness in the chest before checking a balance. Wildly different bank accounts. Being broke was never really a number. It's a gap, the distance between what's coming in and everywhere it already has to go. Some people close that gap as they climb. Most people don't, and it isn't because they're bad with money. That gap follows you up the entire income ladder, through 9 very different tax brackets and 9 very different kitchens, and nobody warns you in advance that it doesn't close on its own. It just changes what it's made of. Level 1. $18,000. You know the price of a gallon of milk to the cent because the cent matters. Your paycheck is $312 after everything's taken out, and every dollar of it has a job before it lands. $210 for your third of the rent, $45 for the phone, the rest for gas and food that has to stretch until the next one. Thursday is always the hard day, the day you check the account before buying anything, even a coffee, because the arithmetic hasn't left room for improvisation. At the grocery store, you do a specific kind of math. Store brand over name brand, the smaller cart instead of the bigger one, a quiet put back at the register when the total lands $4 over what you budgeted for in the parking lot. This isn't discipline. It's just what the number allows, the way a container decides the shape of whatever gets poured into it. Feeling broke here isn't a mindset. It isn't perspective. It's an accurate report from a nervous system reading real numbers. Your roommate, Mia, is in the same bracket, and neither of you performs anything for the other, because there's no audience left to perform for once you're both standing this close to the same edge. This is the one level where the feeling and the fact match exactly. It gets more complicated from here. It never gets this honest again. Level 2. $35,000. The raise looks enormous on the offer letter and feels modest by the second paycheck. Rent goes up when you move somewhere with a working heater. The car needs new tires the same month insurance renews. You do the math, and the number left over at the end of the month is bigger than it used to be, by maybe $140. And that $140 quietly finds something to disappear into that didn't exist at $18,000. A gym membership, a subscription, a dinner out that felt earned. Your coworker Owen makes the same $35,000 and describes himself, unprompted, as doing fine, not great. You'll hear this exact phrase again at every income level from here upward, almost word for word, regardless of what's actually sitting in the account behind it. Owen isn't lying. He genuinely feels the tightness. It's just not coming from the same place it came from a year ago. It's coming from the fact that his expenses learned to read his paycheck exactly as fast as he did. Owen mentions he checked his account 4 times this week, the same number of times he checked it back when he made $24,000. The number he's watching has grown. The habit hasn't gone anywhere. Neither, really, has the feeling underneath the habit. Level 3. $55,000. This is where the apartment gets a second bedroom you don't strictly need, and the car gets upgraded from paid off and fine to financed and nicer. None of it feels reckless in the moment. Each decision, alone, looks like a reasonable use of a reasonable raise. Together, they build a new floor of fixed costs sitting exactly where the old ceiling used to be. Your coworker Sonia got the same raise 18 months ago. She tells you at lunch that she still feels broke, genuinely, not performing modesty, even though her income has grown 40% since you've known her. What changed wasn't the paycheck. The paycheck did what paychecks do. What changed is that her rent, her car payment, and her subscriptions grew right alongside it, at almost exactly the same rate, like 2 lines on a graph that never quite let each other pull ahead. Sonia orders the appetizer at lunch and skips the second glass of wine. The same small hesitations she had at $35,000, just attached to a bigger number now. She isn't underwater. She has savings, a car that runs, a job she likes well enough. She still checks the receipt before tipping. The habits never got the memo that the raise happened. Level 4. $80,000. Somewhere around here, the scarcity stops being about your own numbers and starts being about somebody else's photos. Your friend Chris buys a house this year. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a mortgage of $2,400 a month that eats more of his income than his rent ever did. Chris describes this as finally getting ahead. You rent and save $600 a month into an account Chris doesn't know exists, and some days you feel behind him anyway, because a house is visible and a brokerage statement isn't. The math says something different than the feeling does. Chris is one missed paycheck from real trouble: the roof, the water heater, the property tax bill that arrives every year like a surprise. You are not. But feelings don't consult the math before arriving. They consult what's parked in the driveway next door. You visit Chris for a barbecue in June. The house genuinely looks like an achievement, and it is one, on its own terms. Nobody at the barbecue asks to see either of your account balances. They just admire the yard. This is the level where broke starts meaning behind the people I'm comparing myself to, almost as often as it means anything about your own account. Level 5. $120,000. There's a mortgage now, and daycare, $1,800 a month, for an arrangement that exists specifically so both incomes in the house can keep happening at all. Your friends Grace and Paul bring in $180,000 combined and describe their monthly finances as underwater, which sounds impossible from the outside and turns out to be completely true from the inside. Once daycare, 2 car payments, and a mortgage sized for the neighborhood they felt they'd earned are all subtracted in order. Grace does the math out loud sometimes, almost involuntarily, the way people recite a phone number they memorized without meaning to. Daycare here, the mortgage here, the car payments here. And what's left doesn't look like what $180,000 sounds like when she says the number to her own parents on the phone. Her parents hear the figure and picture a life that isn't quite the one she's actually living inside of. Nobody at this level is lying about feeling broke. The feeling is real. It's just being generated by a different machine than the one running at $18,000. Not too little money arriving, but a life-engineered, reasonable decision by reasonable decision to consume however much shows up. By now, a shape should be visible. At $18,000, the feeling was accurate, a true reading of a real shortage. By $120,000, it's manufactured, not through any dishonesty, but through a chain of individually reasonable decisions that happen to add up to the exact same tightness in the chest you started with. Nobody at any of these levels sat down and chose to feel broke. They just kept saying yes to the next reasonable thing, and the next, until the math caught back up to a feeling it was supposed to have outgrown a long time ago. Level 6. $200,000. The tightness here has a specific address, a neighborhood, a school district, a group of coworkers whose lifestyle quietly becomes the baseline you're measuring yourself against, without ever deciding to. Your colleague, Aaron, earns what you earn. Aaron leases 2 cars and pays $22,000 a year in private school tuition, because that's just what people at his kids' school do. Aaron feels broke most months, in a genuinely uncomfortable way, and Aaron is not exaggerating. The leases and the tuition aren't luxuries to Aaron. They're table stakes, the entry fee for a peer group he's already standing inside of. Aaron didn't sit down and decide to spend this much. He sat down, once, and decided to send his kids to the same school his coworkers did. And every other number followed from that single decision the way water follows a slope. The feeling of not having enough didn't go away when the income tripled from where you started. It just found new furniture to attach itself to. Furniture that happens to cost exactly as much as the raise that was supposed to buy some room to breathe. Level 7. $400,000. Elena is an attorney at your old firm. $400,000 a year. A house in a walkable part of an expensive city. A mortgage that runs $6,800 a month before taxes and insurance get added on top. I don't understand where it goes, she says, and means it. not as a complaint about mismanagement, but as an honest description of a life built, brick by brick, so the number in and the number out sit almost exactly on top of each other. Two people can earn $400,000. One lives somewhere the number stretches, a smaller city, a paid-off car, no private tuition to fund. One lives somewhere it barely covers the mortgage, the 2 car payments, and a lifestyle calibrated to match every other partner at the same firm. Both call themselves comfortable in public. Only one of them means it without flinching. Elena knows this, intellectually. She's read the same numbers you have. It doesn't change the fact that when she sits down at the end of the month, the account looks tighter than the salary suggests it should, and the zip code did more to decide that outcome than the income ever could. Level 8. $1 million. The paradox sharpens here instead of resolving. Julian owns 3 businesses and nets 7 figures most years. Julian also describes himself, accurately, as cash poor. The money is real, but it's tied up in property, in inventory, in a boat that costs more to maintain than it returns in enjoyment, in accounts that can't be touched without a tax consequence attached to touching them. Julian mentions, almost as an aside, that he had to move money between 2 accounts last month to cover a business expense that came due before a client payment landed. $1 million a year, and a cash flow scramble that would sound, described out loud to someone at level 1, like a joke told in bad taste. It isn't a joke. Julian's problem is real. It's just a different species of real than the one at $18,000. Julian's reference point isn't someone earning $35,000. It's the friend from business school who sold a company and now flies privately. Next to that friend, 7 figures a year can genuinely feel modest. The comparison set rose right along with the income, the way it has at every level so far, and there's no obvious floor where it stops rising on its own. Julian would tell you, if you asked, that he knows how this sounds. He's not confused about the math. He built 3 businesses from nothing, and he's grateful, out loud, often. The gratitude and the tightness in his chest turn out to be able to coexist in the same body at the same time, which is maybe the single hardest thing to explain to anyone standing at level 1 looking up. Level 9. $10 million. Victor runs a fund. $10 million moved through accounts with his name on them last year. Victor described a colleague's exit, 9 figures, sold to a public company, as making his own year feel almost small, and he wasn't performing humility for anyone in the room. He meant it, the same uncomfortable, honest way Elena meant it at $400,000, and Owen meant it at $35,000. Victor charters a plane instead of owning one, because owning one outright, at his level, is apparently what people 2 rungs above him do. He mentions the distinction, charter versus owned, the same offhand way Chris mentioned the yard and Aaron mentioned the school district. It's a boundary line, and Victor is aware, with total clarity, of exactly which side of it he's standing on. This is the part almost nobody explains. The feeling of being broke stops being a fact about your bank account fairly early on this staircase. It becomes a fact about the gap between your number and whichever number you've been taught to measure yourself against instead. That second number has no ceiling, because there's always a bigger name at the next table, right up until there's a person on a list of the wealthiest few humans alive, quietly wondering how the others on that same list got so far ahead of them. Somewhere right now, someone with $312 in their account after this week's rent is certain that a bigger number would end this feeling permanently. It will change what the feeling is made of. For almost everyone, it won't end it. Not because more money doesn't help, but because the goalposts move up the ladder right alongside it, level by level, so quietly that almost nobody notices it happening inside their own life, only ever in someone else's. You were never broke because of a number, not past the first level of this staircase. If you're broke at all beyond that point, it's because of a gap you agreed to without ever noticing the agreement. A lease, a school district, a house that needed to be visible to someone standing in a driveway. And the only levels on this entire staircase where anyone actually gets to choose the size of that gap are the ones that come after the first. Level 1 runs on arithmetic. Every level after that runs on a decision nobody remembers making.